states it well. So, who did that? Did the AI do it? Yeah, yeah. Really? You're good. Okay. Okay, I got it. Thank you. Or maybe what's his name again? Yeah, maybe Sir. Can we share all of these audio? Ah, we did not. Where's Zoom? Oh, there. Can't we just tell the AI to do it? Share. All right. Can you see what's going on? No, I mean, can they see? You think? Do they see the PowerPoint? Ask them if. Wait, not yet now, but now. Yeah, if they can see the PowerPoint. Okay. But before we begin, so let's just talk a little bit. Okay, so remind me in maximum 30 so you can watch that. That means it's in your paper. Wait, yeah. No, I should add maximum 3 All right. So, yeah. So, how was your viewing of St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Thomas Words like? Do you have a better appreciation of him now? Did you cry? Did you visit the statue? Yeah, it's there, right? Yeah. So at least the only reason I show it so that people know what that's because it looks so silly. Standing there. Did no one understand what it's about? But actually, that's such a huge statue because it stood at the top of a chapel. There's, there was a chapel, it was the St. Thomas More Chapel, in the law school, and it was, the center of the room. Yeah. But they tore down the chapel and made it into a progress. So yeah, they transferred him here. Okay. I think it's better because then a lot of people can see him. It's just that nobody knows who he is. It's a good thing though, they kept the head on the statue. But that said though, I hope you appreciate how on one's hand, Thomas More was really trying to follow the eternal law, right? Because he believed that, and also, sorry, and also that he was trying to follow the eternal law and the natural law. Okay, because it's the realization of the eternal law, which says that that's I mean a happy husband and wife just remain together when they're married in the church, unless they are that marriage is annulled by Pope, right? Or they're given permission by the Pope. Okay, but you can understand as well the king's dilemma, right? Because the king didn't just want to get married because he was tired of his wife. Okay, that's the thing you should appreciate here. He wasn't tired of his wife, his former wives, who he killed and prison and got rid of. But he was really needing a successor. Okay, and if he didn't have successors, it would mean another bloody war, which is really going. It would really because when King Henry was able to consolidate his power, once it's consolidated, that's the thing with monarchies. Once you consolidate the power, then everyone knows what the succession is. But if succession is not established, then you break out into a bloody war, right? That's why I keep saying also that when people try to say that Bongbong Marcos is not really the president of the Philippines. No, because you have to respect that. It's a clear succession system, right? Even if you don't accept it morally, right? If you don't accept that, then how will we change presidents? Blood coups and demonstrations and disruptions, constant disruptions of society. and that's not good, right? That's not good at all. So you can understand what the king really needed. The king really needed. He needed succession. But what did he want from Thomas More? He wanted to seal the deal in a manner of speaking because he was one of the most respected members of the king's among the king's advisors, right? Because he was a chancellor. It was a chancellor, but he was and the king wanted him to clearly assent to the new arrangement. Actually, he did. Did you notice he said, oh yes, and I agree that those children, the king's children, are his successors. Did you notice that? That when he was asked, so does that mean you don't agree that the children are the king's successors? What did he say? He said, oh no, I've been public about that. If the parliament has the authority to declare them to be the successors, and the parliament has, therefore I agree. I have no problem with that. But you have a problem with the marriage, but he didn't say it first. Do you notice how he wasn't saying anything? You know why? Well, of course, because he's protecting his life, right? Right? But also, I think in a sense, he knew what the king needed anyway. The king just needed succession. If you wanted succession, you had succession. And he just wouldn't say anything about it. But it was because it was a question of his conscience, which is the eternal law and the natural law, right? It's a question of the natural law. We understand that the king, it's not within the authority of the king or parliament to grant the annulment of a marriage made in the church. It's only the it's only within the power or the authority of the Pope. The Pope gave it and fined it. The Pope did because he didn't have any objection. Just needed the Pope to say that it was legitimate, right? Which but then he wouldn't comment about it until then, up to then. But when he was condemned to death, then he said it, right? In fact, he was even telling his daughter and his wife, read what they're saying. Because if you can assent to it, go ahead, assent to it. My only problem is that the king is usurping authority that doesn't belong to him. Because it belongs to the Pope, who is a representative of the third of the natural law based on, and this time based really on the third law, right? So he was just really following his conscience in this case, and he was martyred for political reasons. But you can see how I just let you watch because then you can see how they're different levels of law actually from practicing here, right? Because St. Thomas More had no problems with human law when it didn't transgress the natural things, right? And as long as it was applied to the eternal law, he had no problem. But that's why he didn't have no problem with the children because it was the succession. Because it was within human law to determine that. And who determined it? The parliament. Why were they allowed to determine it? Because they were the recognized authority, a community record. Remember what makes a legitimate law, right? Must be it must be promulgated and made, it must be formulated by the proper authority who has both the power and the authority and the authority to make such a law because it's within their jurisdiction, right? So that's the reason why I wanted you to watch St. Thomas movie. But for one, because it's very inspiring, right? How he stood by his conscience. Actually, you might not agree with what his position was. I don't know how many of you would agree with his position, right? Like, was it a matter really of the Pope that to say that, but did it matter that much? It's a question, did it matter that much? It didn't actually matter that much because in the end, no, the king just made his own church, right? But it did not matter that much either because what did it matter if St. Thomas More didn't assent to it, right? But it didn't matter. But I think the king needed stability. He needed someone that the people respected to say that his marriage was legitimate. Right? That's what we needed. Okay. But St. Thomas More couldn't give it because it couldn't violate his own conscience. Because of his integrity. Right. Um, so there, that's basically our question. And he explained it in the end, right? Because basically the human person is up is a in a sense what we the human person is a promise. Okay? It's a promise of what you want to be and who you hope to be and what you're most faithful to and that you're going to be remaining faithful to what you promise to be. And he promised to be faithful to God's law, right? And to follow his promise. That's why he said to his daughter, remember, daughter or wife, I'm not sure, when they were saying, why don't you just see it? Other people are just doing it. Then he said, but that's their own conscience. But the man holds his himself, not his life, but himself, like sand in his hands. And if you open your hand, then the sand will run out. Then who are you? Right? That's because it's so fragile. But what he's saying here is that yourself, your identity, your wholeness, you really is really very much dependent on what you can stand by and what you promise yourself to be. And if you betray that, then who are you? That's that's basically what we stand by. But then you can also see ultimately that the only way they could kill him, that the only way they could silence him that way him was to violate the law, right? Because see, here's the other thing. St. Thomas More St. Thomas More prized more than anything his adherence to the natural law, right? He died for it. But did you notice how he would also respect human law to the letter? Which is why he didn't talk, right? Because he knew that if he did not talk, they had nothing to prosecute him for. In fact, in the end, they only got him by getting the Sirich to lie, right? And he lied because St. Thomas More never said anything, right? So he knew the law very well and he respected human laws, right? Right. And he knew that the only problem in this case was that the actions of the king did not respect natural law. But everything else that was instituted according to the proper authorities, that was promulgated, all of those things, he followed, he accepted it. He accepted it. I think this is for this lesson is um particularly relevant to you people in this room, right? Because in the end, you will become priests. Maybe. Right? Maybe. Or if all of you will become priests. I hope so. If not, that's okay. You can become lawyers. Because at least you know how after all of I'm hoping you when you're all, but I think even if you don't become priests, you kind of leaders in the church. Um, because I think you're set up for this, right? But my point now is that as you become priests, you will have to do exactly what Saint not become martyrs. I don't mean become martyrs, but I mean what Saint Thomas More was. You will have to understand that ultimately you are bound by natural law to the people you are, right? Because you're gonna be making vows um that will tie you to tie yourself, your wholeness, your humanity, your fullness as a person to to the realization of the natural law as it is defined in your orders, right? Now that's what you're going to promise to. But at the same time, you're going to realize that you're citizens of the nation, right? But not the citizens, unfortunately, You will also be some kind of leaders who will be looked up to, maybe. I don't know if that's true. But you will be some kind of leaders who the community will look up to, right? So you have to balance really how you stand by the natural law and how you will respect human laws, right? And I think what Saint Thomas teaches us, I think it's very good. Did you see the another readings I said also? I'm sorry it's hard to read because it's flip flopping. Well, I'm the only one who's arrested, so I'm the one who's scanned it, so that's your problem. But my students were able to fix it. I tried to ask it from them so I can send you a better one, the one that doesn't flip flop. But like I said, it's the same text. Did you notice? It's exactly the same text. Not exact, but it's where the selections were drawn from. Although the selections got more things from other places, but mainly a natural law that's source. And then at least I wanted you to read it so that you would read it twice. And so that you would know the original form of how St. Thomas writes. Okay. Anyway, my point, what I wanted to say, I think it's really important what St. Thomas teaches us, that we have to respect human laws because human laws are created in order to ensure that the society can act together. No, human laws are made in order to bind the society to act to act virtuously for the common good. It's just about civic virtue, okay? But it doesn't expect that if human laws are not made to make people virtuous in a godly way, or to make people virtuous as in virtuous morally, right? The laws are just there to bind us to realize the natural law in such a way that we can live together in solidarity, in cooperation, in order to gather a community to realize the common good, which will lead to eudaimonia. That's it, right? So it's not there to make us perfect. Those natural and human laws are not there to make us citizens of heaven particularly, right? Those are what the laws of your congregations are. But natural law doesn't govern everyone who's I mean, the human law cannot expect everyone to be virtuous and it cannot demand that of all people because its only aim is to bind people to the good such that they act in a way that will allow them to build a shared community of cooperation and solidarity so that realize they can realize the common good which will lead to their individual happiness. That's it. Okay. So it also makes us wonder then. I mean, it also, I think, might be a good foundation to reflect on the separation of the churches, right? Because the church is there for the perfection of human, right? It's a as much as possible, right? But that, of course, the aim of the church is to help us become the most perfect human beings that we can be, the most perfect children of God we can be. Okay, well, not perfect, but virtuous, moral, and it can demand it can call us to certain levels of self-realization, which are higher than other citizens who are not members of the church, right? That's the church's role. So therefore, but then the church therefore doesn't should restrain itself in trying to impose laws that really don't belong to the human law which guides the state. And that's why we have to be discerning about it. Because, and this is why the separation of the church and state is crucial, right? Because ultimately, the state is just supposed to gather us to work for our mutual, for our common good. in order to realize our eudaimonia, our happiness, right? It's not there to make us citizens of heaven. So the church should always discern its interventions in the secular state, right? Because the church doesn't always know what's best. And I say this sideways honestly. It's true, right? The church doesn't always know what's best for the secular state. Because it's sometimes what it seems to think as lawful and necessarily lawful sa human law is really aimed at realizing the perfection of human beings. And it doesn't really consider what would be to the realization of the common good on a human level, right? Like for instance, I have no position, I have no position, so I won't say it because like St. Thomas More, I don't want father rector at my head up. Mo Father Olive is already it's already the provincial, right? Um, so there. But like for instance, something like divorce, right? I mean, people are saying, why isn't there divorce in the Philippines? And the church is saying, oh, because violates God's law, right? But then some people are advocating for divorce are saying, but you know what, there's so much abuse of women going on. And they cannot live lives that are, especially because the society is unequal and it allows for the abuse of women. So a lot of women are stuck to abusive relationships that are destroying their humanity, that are not allowing them to flourish as persons because they can't get divorced. They can't separate property. They can't demand from their husbands um to support them. And there has to be it's very difficult reasons to be able to separate with that, right? And so women, in order to free themselves from abuse, have to go through so much difficulties, which actually entails a lot of cost and more psychological abuse. This in order to free themselves. Now, I'm not saying that maybe therefore we should allow divorce. I'm just saying, isn't that a question for the state, right? And the church is saying, no, divorce goes against God's law. But the state is saying, well, maybe we need this particular thing to save certain people because it's violating their good. And we're talking about the common good. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it is, but like that's why the church, for instance, was so against was so against um act- the women's health act, yeah, the RH bill, right? Because no artificial contraceptives, you can't give the all these contraceptives. But then the state was saying, yeah, but based on statistics, you really probably need something like this because a lot of poor people are suffering because of certain conditions that you can't address perfectly, right? And because you're saying, therefore, they must be perfectly virtuous to have a better life. And we're saying, maybe not, maybe there's some stuff going on, and maybe this human law could actually address some of those problems. Because you cannot legislate everyone to be a perfect person. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying that, oh, so that the church was wrong or right. I'm just saying that's where the church should be thinking, right? That separation of church and state is necessary because I mean it can be justified from a Thomistic perspective. All right. But that's not me. For me, it doesn't negate the fact that the church belongs to the community, right? And its people are part of the sovereign, right? So the church still has space for intervention too, right? Because it has to add its voice. But it also has to recognize that it's one voice among many. It can advocate, it should, right? Because I mean, how many times has the church saved so many people, so many nations from from violence and falling into to falling into like from the state breaking up and consequent civil war and all these things. Church intervention has always been a very important thing, right? Because it's one of the best citizens, has some of the best citizens, and it must intervene. But in the sense that it cannot that it's engaging the state and engaging, and it must be aware that what if it's engaging is human law, right? It's not building the kingdom of God through the state. That's a different thing. That's God's business here is where he's speaking it, right? But we can't use the state to build the kingdom of God. Although we could direct the state to the human laws in such a way that it makes us better persons. Can't demand it unless it has something to do with the common good, right? And I think as people of the church, as the people of God's kingdom, we do have an advantage in understanding the common good. I think so, right? We do. Just that we should have imposed a bit different people. Okay. Anyway, yeah, but that's why I think it's important to study also Thomas more because I Thomas, Saint Thomas, because even if he's a saint, and he's a church man, right? He shows us also that human states need human laws. Okay? And that although we are engaged in state and that human laws are supposed to serve natural law, they cannot be legislated in such a way that it will be impossible for people to follow. And it might actually end up breaking up the um the police or the state or the community or the structure that binds us. Okay. Right. So there, we're done with Thomas. For any question? Yes.
So what about certain cultural diversity? So because on the lens of Thomas More, he's looking on the one culture itself, but making it not relevant today, since natural is good, natural is growing, but it also does not varies from different culture.
Yeah.
Although there's in the Philippines per se, there's a separation of church and state. But then the laws that are being provided are not actually culturally relevant to the Filipinos. And it's actually the culture of the Western
Yeah.
Western society of some sort. So yeah.
That would be the state failing to create laws that are actually relevant to the common good. A lot of our laws don't serve the common good if you think about it, right? For instance, property, the way we define property, how we own property, it really runs contrary to how most people understand what owning property is and the relationship to land, for instance, right? That's why they have to amend property laws by just saying, okay, well, there's an exception. The indigenous people can apply for it for ancestral domain, right? But but that's actually more indigenous to us. And the laws that were imposed on us were really very foreign, right? So I think human laws should always still fall within. They should serve number one of the first thing, first things first. The human laws should serve the human community, right? Our laws do not. They serve the market. I mean, they serve the global market. They serve capitalists still. They serve extraction of resources, but they don't serve the people, right? So in whatever in the Philippines and a lot of countries that were colonized, it's true, right? So that's why we should record. That's why things like the ancestral domain law are such a big deal. It's extremely significant, right? Because then you begin to realize it. They have their own way of understanding property. Yes. So good one.
Because in some other countries, their cultures, they can really have many polygamy,
Yeah, right.
multiple marriages.
Mhm.
So
What about that? No, yeah, but things like that, you always, because right, because you also have to understand, I think, that certain cultural traditions, most cultural traditions, serve exist because they serve a purpose. They serve a purpose. Um, Probably something very important during their time, right? But the problem with customs is that they stay beyond their usefulness, right? So maybe the way we treated women, like for instance, maybe the way the Taliban wants women to be treated, maybe it made sense at a certain time for the common good, right? And maybe that's why women at that time adhere to it, perhaps, right? But women, they cannot adhere to that because clearly it's being used to violate their dignity as person, for instance. So that's why human laws need to be constantly preserved. How they adhere to the natural law, how they adhere to the common law. So yeah, I would say there should always be constant discernment, but also respect for the fact that if there's certain laws or customs that carried down through generations, they probably serve a purpose, a very human and necessary purpose, but maybe they're superseded because conditions change. That's why I think it's so important that states always have constant mechanisms for dialogue, which we will get to in after soon. Okay, great. Any more questions? Okay. So I'm just going to explain to you how the social contract and how the social contract theory came about. And I think it has to do with the autonomous, rational individual. Okay. And that's really a big change in Rousseau's time. Okay. Now, why is the social contract necessary? Well, basically, this is how we all understand um, the social, the in a sense, today, everybody understands our communal existence in a nation state, as a contractual um, existence. Okay? It's basically a contract. Well, it depends with who. But in general, it's a contract that we have with the sovereign. The individual has a contract with the sovereign. However you define the sovereign. And the contract is basically that I have duties and law, I have duties and obligations, and but I also have rights because I'm in this state. But you have duties and obligations towards me because and I as in order to protect me. And that's the only reason you exist. Because you have duties and obligations towards me. And I also have duties and obligations towards you. And these duties and obligations are clearly stated or somewhat clearly stated. Depends. They're extremely clearly stated in a constitutional, in a written constitution, right? A written constitution is a social contract, right? But some nations don't have written constitutions, and yet they still have a social contract because of certain traditional um, understandings of their relationship between the citizen and the state. So often we think of the social contract as a relationship, a formal relationship really between the citizen and the state, and that the laws that the state I'm sorry, that the constitution that is formulated in defining and establishing the state is really the embodiment of that state. That's why everyone has to study it. I mean, any person in any do you have to study? Do you have to study your constitution in here? I work, sorry. Yeah. Do you know? Oh, but I guess why? Oh, yeah. Space, yeah. Every other has more. So, yeah, universities. Okay. But not when you're here. So, in the Philippines, we have to study those children, right? And nobody really understands it. But they explain it in such a way that it's friendly to children. I think so anyway. At least when you're a child, they explain what your rights are. That's how we start. That please explain what your rights are. Um, yeah, but I guess that would be well, but it's important for people to understand what the constitutions are, why? Because that's basically how you understand what your social contract is. Because you do have duties to the state, and it has to be stated clearly what those duties are. It also has to be stated clearly what the state's duties are towards you and what are its obligations toward you, as much as what your obligations are toward state. And then also your rights. Because then the state can always trump the rights because it's the bigger thing, right? Um, if you look at Saint Thomas and Plato, there seems to be like a hint of a kind of a social contract. So actually, if you go back to Socrates, remember, and Plato, when they were talking with Plato, he was talking about a social contract, right? He was talking about a social contract about how, like, you have I allow you to have power over me, and then I have obligations towards you, right? And you have obligations towards me, and these are what are allowed and not allowed based on our contract. And then Saint Thomas also speaks about, especially when he says, do you remember when he says, what is good governance? And then in the end he says, well, in the end, the best governance is a monarchy. The best government is a monarchy. And but the monarchy should be structured in such a way that the king cannot monopolize power to benefit only himself, and that people must have a way of um ousting the king if he violates what? The social contract, right? In a sense, no sense, the social contract. But Rousseau really is the first to really articulate, well, not the first, but one of the best to really articulate what that contract is about, what what it's about, what it's trying to do, how it's helping us in our society. Okay, so let's talk first about the necessity of the social contract. Why is it necessary to have a social contract? Okay, it will become easier to understand when we understand the development of the autonomous rational person in modernity. Okay. Um, because from our previous periods, we can see how the focus of good governance is on the citizens and the state aim to realize the common good within the canopy of the eternal law, the cosmic law, right? There's always that sense that somehow there's an order that transcends us, and that basically, even for making human laws that are very finite, we're still trying to work in such a way that these human laws are aligned to the eternal law, to the infinite good. And, because that existed. And what does human good really mean? But to align, but what I mean, ultimately, what does human good really mean from us? I don't know. What does human good? What what must we do to realize our good? But to align our existence in a way to the natural law, to realize the law, to realize that eternal order, that order of the good, that rules all things. That's why Socrates and Plato seek to align themselves with the idols, and Saint Thomas always is aware that ultimately there's natural law for which human law must somehow be aligned. Okay, and never, at least not to violate it. And the best will be to align with. Okay, so that's how we understand it. But something happened in modernity. Something happened in modernity, and it's kind of a long story. So here it goes. But what happened in modernity is this. We began to realize that human beings, okay, first what we began to realize was this. human beings could understand nature on their own without relying on theology or myth. Okay. How? Through science, through the powers of experimental science, through the investigations of the experimental science. Okay. So um that's how human beings are able to understand the process of um right. That's how human beings are were able to discover how nature works. Human beings began to realize their power of investigating nature using reason alone. Okay. So, what did they do? So they started actually investigating nature. They started using instruments that helped us understand the more accurately how nature worked, what was happening and things happening in nature. And then what happened was we began to realize that the church wasn't the most reliable source of knowledge. At least scientific knowledge, maybe the knowledge about God, or things um, that the church would still be us. And myth also wasn't the most reliable form of knowledge, at least not the kind of knowledge that makes you understand the processes of nature, predict it, and manipulate it. See, these are three very important discoveries of Western humanity is that if you study nature with precision and exactness, and with with absolute abstraction, diba? You can reduce nature's first of all, you can discover so many things about nature, how it works. And you can understand it with such precision that you can make predictions. And then you can predict, right? Which is what I'm one of the major points of and one of the major turns of that whole period was the whole discovery of the Copernican revolution, right? Because before the Copernican revolution, there's a Ptolemaic system, which understood that the Earth was at the center of the universe, and then everything revolved around the Earth, and everything revolved following perfect circular orbits. Okay? Why is that? The Earth had to be at the center because theologically, Jesus came to the earth. Why would Jesus come to the earth? Jesus, the Son of God, no, he's the Son of God, come to the earth if the earth was at the center of the universe. Hence, had to be the center of the universe. Second, well, from observation, it seems like planets are revolving around the earth, right? But they probably turn in a perfect circles, round orbits, circular orbits. Why? Because the circle is the shape of perfection, right? And those are all theological principles, right? Now, it worked for a while, it worked for a while when there weren't very precise instruments. People were able to say, oh, look at this system. If you follow this system that is theologically sound, we can still predict where Venus will be in 2 years, where Mars will rise, where the Big Dipper will be at certain times of the year. Right? That was not a problem. But it's just because you're looking at it, from like us, just looking at it from here, serving it from the ground, right? But what was happening was people were beginning to develop more precise um, telescopes. And with these more precise telescopes, they were saying if you apply the Ptolemaic system, Venus is supposed to be here, but actually it's here. What's going on? And then finally, Copernicus figured it out. Oh, what if we put the sun at the center? And what if we're just one of the planets circling? Oh, and what if the circle, what if the orbits aren't perfect circles, right? But what do we call elliptical movements, right? But that's not perfect. When it's an ellipsis, that means that the surface is kept perfectly equal or times. And so it kind of offended the theological principles that define how the universe should be shaped. And who else knows the universe more than the church, right? But then they were able to prove more and more that the model, the Ptolemaic model, wasn't really accurate. When you have more accurate instruments, you begin to realize that the original model wasn't okay. So that's why they were trying to push for the Copernican model, which explains things more accurately, which got Galileo in trouble, to start Galileo, right? Galileo, okay, in fairness to the church, it was really fair to Galileo. I mean, the church has recently apologized to Galileo because it put him under house arrest. But here's the story. Galileo wanted to really push the Copernican revolution model, right? And the Copernican solar system model. So he asked the church permission. I don't know, he asked him the bishop or something, or maybe the pope. And they said, you know, this is why it's fair to the church. And they said to Galileo, it's still a theory, right? It's basically what they said. It hasn't been completely proven. It's still a theory. So you can write about it, but as long as you make sure that you present the other side as a theory, as an equal theory. That's all they wanted from Galileo. Do you know that? They weren't suppressing Galileo. That's all we thought, right? A lot of us were probably told that the church tried to suppress Galileo. It didn't. What the church said was, you may present the theory, but present it as an equal theory to the original Ptolemaic one, which I think is fair, right? Because Galileo was just positing a theory which had evidence. Oh, but you know what? There's this one philosopher called Fire Appel, was a philosopher of science, and he looked through Galileo's papers, and you know what he found out? At least this is his theory. Galileo lied, and he faked his results just so the Copernican model would look right. But the problem was his telescopes weren't that accurate. So anyway, whatever. The point was Galileo came up with a dialogue where both models were presented. It was a dialogue, like a Platonic dialogue, but it was presented in such a way that the man representing the Ptolemaic model was an idiot. And that's why the church got so mad. They said, what are you doing? Right? We really clearly presented the parameters. Plus, you're not being intellectually honest anyway. Because of that, they laughed. But anyway, he was right. Okay. Which the lesson here, people, is that you can be right even if you're lying. Okay, maybe not. Anyway, but that was really what it was. He really lied about it, but he was right in the end. Anyway, not the best way to put that you're right. So anyway, my point though is this: why was it so important with the Copernican model? Because it showed the power of human reason. And it also showed that in order to really explain the natural world in a way that's useful to human beings, you should begin to explore it according to human reason. Okay. Now, what was the effect of that? The effect of that was the church lost its power in the Renaissance. It couldn't dictate anymore. It could take how it dictate things and all of that. It lost its power. What rose in the place of the church as an authority for true knowledge? The human being, the individual human being and his knowledge and his reason. That's basically what emerged from that. That basically people said, you know what? Now that you don't have a church that says there's a cosmic order, and oh, by the way, all we have is reason that is supposed to discover and determine that cosmic order. Therefore, it looks like we're all on our own. I mean, right? Because what did they discover? First of all, they discovered that reason was a powerful thing to understand reality and to shape it. Right? Now, since we can shape reality, we are no longer subject to reality. So what are we? Well, we are capable of determining ourselves according to our freedom, according to our knowledge. That's what defines us. Not the church, not doctrines revealed by God, but basically reason, understanding the world, reason being able to understand the world in such a way that human will can impose itself upon the world, and therefore all that there is the human person with his freedom, reason, and autonomy. Okay. So each person was an autonomous human being capable of deciding for him or herself, maybe here, what is right, what is true, what is just. Because then, the church as a source of all of that has been kind of discredited, right? Because it's all about human reason and human will. Okay. Now think about this. How you gather autonomous, free individuals? How will you gather autonomous individuals who are free and have free use of their own reason and have the power to shape the world they live? How can you gather them in a community and make them adhere to the common systems that the community will share, right? The only way you can get in the old days, you could actually get people to follow because they believe in the eternal law and if you and the natural law, and basically they understood that according to the natural law, they should live this way, they could act this way, they could be this way together, right? But what if human beings already have the power to shape their own action, have the reason to determine what's reasonable and what they ought to do and how they ought to do it? How do you gather them together and tell them you should come together because it's what? For your own benefit, right? That's the only way. Because you can't say God wants you to come together. You can't say, oh, because according to the idea realm of the idols, it's best that we come together. Right? Because the eternal law determines that there is no eternal law anymore. Or there is, but that's just for nature. Doesn't matter anymore in the everyday life. Because here we are, human beings who realize that if we use reason, we can determine the meaning of our own existence, and we can determine the shape of our communal existence. But what will gather us together? I will ensure that we will stay together in a reasonable way. That we can gather together in a way that would actually an autonomous person would want to surrender himself to a shared communal system. And that's the real question. What would make an autonomous person give up his autonomy in order to become part of a whole, right? Well, in the end, it's still the same, common good, right? Because everyone understands you cannot survive on your own, no matter how powerful your reason is and your rationality is so attuned to understanding nature that you can determine it and manipulate it according to how you want. You can't do it as an individual, you still do it as a community. So yes, okay, we want to do it as a community. But what's the principle of us coming together? Right? Because remember, what you're putting together are autonomous rational people. Okay? Autonomy is the feeling. We are self-determined. Okay? We're self-determined. We determine how and why we do anything. And basically the how and why we do anything is our interest. Right? Just to show you how different it is. And I think but then I'm sure we could get other examples from our own culture. But there's an interesting example from America that will help us understand it. Because there's a myth, because I don't think we've any like that. But there's a myth in America about how the white settlers came. Like it's not actually a myth, it's very historical. But and it really happened. Sorry, it really happened. And it's a thing they passed down from generation to generation. I don't know why they pass it down because it really makes white people look very bad. But anyway, the story of Pocahontas. I'm sure you watched the movie, right? Yeah, the Disney interpretation. That is so wrong compared to the real story. Because when historians, because like, here's the bear story, right? White people came to America, okay? Um, they were refugees from religious persecution. They came to America to establish their own colony, but they were too stupid to survive. That's basically the story. Because they didn't know what they could eat or what to plant and what they could kill and what they could harvest and whatever. And that's why they needed to trade basically with the Native Americans. They needed to trade with the Native Americans because they wouldn't survive without the trade, right? And so what happened was nothing. They couldn't trade with the Native Americans. Why? Because to the Native Americans, they weren't human beings, right? For one thing, they really smelled wrong. Okay. Apparently, can I just share this? Because it's so funny about white people. But when the Spaniards came to the Aztecs, right? And then they were writing things like, they think we're gods. Because wherever we walk, they're always putting incense like that. They're making they're like what we do with our with our altars during feast days. They're only blowing incense towards them. The reason is because the people really couldn't stand how they smell. They really stank because they had bad hygiene. So they're always trying to cover their smell up with the incense. But the stupid white people thought that they were gods. Anyway, this is the kind of attitude that those Native Americans had to those first settlers. They really said we cannot trade with them because they're not human beings. Now but there was a solution. Because I don't know why they wanted to trade with them because in the end they would steal their land, right? And kill them all. But which is the biggest mistake I think of the Native Americans, just to help Americans white people. But they did help them in this way. So remember, they wanted to trade, but they couldn't trade because they weren't humans, right? How do you transform non-humans into humans? So they came up with a plan. They would pretend to kidnap, they would not pretend, ritually kidnap John Smith. There was really a John Smith. They would take John Smith to their camp and execute him for violating whatever. But that was the plan. So they ritually kidnapped John Smith and put his head on a log, and then that's how they executed people. They smashed their heads like watermelons. That was really horrible. But that's how they did it. So they were going to so after the ritual kidnapping was the ritual execution. So they were going to kill John Smith. But Princess Pocahontas ran towards John Smith and put her head on top of his, so they couldn't kill him. Right? So to save his life. Even if it was ritual, because they were really going to kill him. That ritual, she saved his life, which makes them what? Blood brother and sister, right? So therefore, John Smith, who was saved by Pocahontas, is now a human and they can trade. You see? But how did Disney present the story? Disney present the story because Pocahontas had individuality and she wanted to explore possible worlds of openness to the other, right? That's how Disney tells the story. The fact is, Pocahontas could never have thought of that. In fact, the whole saving thing was a ritual thing. She was just assigned to do it, but she was the princess. Okay? She was the princess. And that's why they could become blood brother and sister with the camp. And then they could trade with them because they're human already, they're sibling or their blood related. You know what I'm saying? But Pocahontas would never have thought of that as an individual. She was acting according to the rituals that bind the community, according to the myths that bind the community, and according to the common will, right? That is not an autonomous, rational human being according to modernity, right? She's still, well, what they would consider tribal, perhaps what we would consider traditional, a person of a traditional communal relationship, right? Which I think still exists among many of us. That's why we have a hard time sometimes dealing with modern democracy, the way it's defined by the West. Because modern democracy, as it's defined by the West, is designed for autonomous, rational, maybe autonomous, free human beings who don't think as communal, don't think communally, but think and act individually, right? So here again is the question. How do you bring people like that together? People like Pocahontas, you understand how they bring them together. Because they believe in the same myths, they believe in the same stories that bind them, they believe that they belong to a community, that they actually feel that they have one mind and heart. It's probably a true experience for them. But for the modern person, he understands his rationality and his will to be his reason and will to be autonomous and individual. How do you find that person? Except through his assent, right? The person has to assent to a community and has to assent to a shared world where everyone can participate. But in order to do that, that means the persons who enter into that shared relationship have to understand that surrendering their autonomy, because it's basically it, right? When you become a citizen, you basically surrender your autonomy. Otherwise, if you're not part of a state, you can just act any way you want, right? I mean, think about it. Because you're in a state, you cannot um marry your relatives, for instance, right? That's part of it. Like you cannot marry your close relatives. Um, you cannot just kill anyone. If you didn't belong to a state, you could just kill anyone. Just annoyed you, right? Or someone that you want to seek revenge for because you did some slightly. If you're autonomous and individual, you can just do that. You don't belong to the state, right? In fact, if there's autonomous individual, you could just get whatever property anyone else had as long as you could steal it, as long as you could grab it from them and keep them away from it, right? Then you could just steal anything if you were an individual. Now, why would you want to give that up? Right? Because then if you're alone and acting on your own, you could just act on your own and desire to act on your act and stay on your own. But therefore, you have, in order to build a community and a state, you have to convince the individual why it's advantageous for them. Why is it an advantage for you to become part of the state? Why is it advantageous for you to be part of this community? Right? So there. That's why the social contract is necessary. First of all, um, okay, sorry. Let's do this. I will just go through the slides. I'm sure I don't miss anything. So in modernity, we discovered autonomy, abstract reason, and the human power over nature and over other people. So our conception of equality and good governance had to change because nga it wasn't based on the cosmic order. Okay. Because then we could make our own systems. So why form a state? Okay, here's now the question. Why when individuals come together to form a state? Okay. It's a question of what is a natural society. Okay. Natural society is composed of persons in a natural state without the artifice of civilization. So in short, I don't actually know when this actually existed because we'll probably think, oh yeah, in the time of the cavemen, without what we call cavemen, didn't have social organization or civilization. But let's just think about it as a thought experiment, right? Think about people in a world where there are no rules for how to come together and how to own property and how to engage each other, right? In such a world, the only rule is violence and force. If you can, actually, that is still true now, if you think about it. When they talk about failed states, like now, there's going to be an intervention in Somalia. again, but this time by the African na the African Union will haven't been very ano, may UN yata, pero the forces will come from the African or be headed by members of the African Union. And they're going to enter Somalia because Somalia is being ruled by gangs. I mean, literally ruled by gangs. There's no, the government cannot be UN. Of course, everyone has to just, because the gangs control the airport, the gangs control the roads, the gangs control transportation, they control distribution and all of that. So this is basically probably the closest thing in modern times we have to the natural society because ultimately it's a society ruled by force, right? Who is the person who can impose the rules? The strongest warlord, which is exactly what's happening. The strongest warlords, the warlords are fighting among each other in order to impose their rules over the resources, the people, the political power. So that's basically what we have. That's how you can understand what the natural state is. It's ruled by the imposition of force and violence. That's why when the state is like that, they call it a failed state, right? I don't know if they declared Somalia a failed state. I think the government is still functioning somehow. But like huge parts of the country are controlled by the impositions of force and violence by rival gangs. Okay. And I think what they mean by rival gangs are tribal war leaders. No? So there's no justice there. There's no justice, right? But that's have to do with no one's rights are respected, no one's needs are respected, no one's duty, no one has a duty to protect anyone. Basically, the only this such a state is the purest rule of might. Now, if you think about it, and we can see it in Somalia today, it's disadvantageous because it's not stable or sustainable. Right? Because every time you have, ultimately there's no peace, no one can be creative, no one can invent, and no one has any incentive to actually be productive. Because if you're productive, someone will steal it, right? So there, that's why, and actually, this is another thing to consider, right? Um, what they realize is when states are very established upon rule of law, when laws are predictable, when the systems are clear, that's when people are can be most creative and productive, right? So he's right. This state is disadvantageous and it's not stable or sustainable. Okay. So, the advantage of collective existence in a state, therefore, would be that everyone is ruled by laws and systems defined by laws. It's not arbitrary, will be fair to all. Like for instance, if you really have a good state run by systems, no one will be fairly disadvantaged, right? Everyone will bear the burdens together. Everyone will share the fruits. That's basically what it is. So to be fair to all, because the people, and this is the difference in a state, but this is a modern state already, as understood by Rousseau. Okay, because the people are the sovereign, right? The people rule themselves for their own good, which is tied to the common good, and the government serves the people under their sovereignty. So this is what a collective existence in a state means. Okay? When you come together in a state, you rule yourself for your own good, but your own good is tied to the common good, and basically the government, which has authority and the monopoly of violence, and the government has the monopoly of violence over you, and authority and all of that, that the yeah, so the government serves you because you are the sovereign who institutes the government and for whom and for and who the government serves. Okay, now how does this answer a question? The question is, why would rational autonomous persons put themselves under a state? Because in a modern state, the rational autonomous person doesn't really give up his or her um autonomy and power actually because you rule over yourself but as part of the sovereign, right? We, the people, rule ourselves, right? It's just that you, instead of ruling as an individual, imposing your will on everyone, you now rule with the collective. And that's what we call the sovereign. Okay? In a state, you surrender your autonomy as a separate individual. Okay? You surrender your capacity and freedom to do anything that you want, but you do it in order to come under a state, in order for you to live according to the common, in order for you to collectively realize the common good, which you yourself determine. Because when you enter a state, you're not putting yourself under anyone's authority except yourself. Except yourself here is the collective self, right? There. That's how the social contract theory solves the question of how do you build a modern state when the modern state is governed, when the modern state is composed by autonomous individuals. Okay. Yeah. Now, before we get deeper into the so, I want to give you again the introduction. So it's now 3:17. We will end around 4:20 maybe or 4:15. Again, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna play it here. Okay, who's gonna stay to what? Please, you. Because I'm gonna give you the choice. You can take the file, I'll put it, upload it, and you can go and do whatever you want as long as you watch it. Okay, so who wants to stay here to watch it? Yes. So, yun nga, meron naman. But like, if you stay here to watch it, can you turn it off after and then turn off the air? Okay. All right. So now I'm gonna play it so that we don't have to stay too long. I'm gonna leave you guys because I've seen this. And now I'm gonna share screen. Wait that. So for the home audience, I'm gonna share screen too so that you can watch it. All right. Where is it? Also have a Yes, yes, I'll put it. I'll put the link in the canvas. Right? It's on YouTube anyway. So I'll put the link in the canvas. But here I'm going to play it. Where is it? Ah, oh, wait a minute. Where did I put it? I know I put it somewhere. A very unknown. I where is it? Oh no. Okay, I'm going to transfer it again. Huh. Wait. My so I still and yesterday access areas right. So this still speaker please say. Is this the loudest? Well, I guess you guys have to come nearer, huh? Ah, wait, maybe I can play. No, no, never mind. I played in VLC. I hope that everybody followed Rousseau's advice and yesterday exercised your
rights as as citizens of a free state? I hope so. But I begin today with an apology. And that is for the particular edition that you're using for this section of the class on Rousseau. This is the only edition that I've assigned in the course that I don't like. Why did I assign it? Because I want us to read the second discourse, the discourse on inequality, and the social contract. And this is the only edition that I could find where they are both in the same volume, and I don't have to assign two separate books. So in order to keep your costs down, I bit the bullet and assigned in a translation in an edition I don't particularly care for. A far superior edition is found in this is one of the two volumes, the Cambridge Blue Book series, as it's called, edited and translated by Gurevich. If anybody wants to do more advanced work in Rousseau, you will no doubt get this edition, better translations, better notes, and so on of the second discourse and the social contract. And for anybody who's interested, I've decided, because Rousseau has become so important to me, the next year I will be offering an undergraduate seminar entirely devoted to Rousseau. He's one of the handful of writers, of political philosophers, to whom one could, justice, devote an entire semester to his writings. And that's what I want to do next year. So if any of you should get the bug, the Rousseau bug, next year we'll do Rousseau in many more texts in detail. So with that having been said, I want to talk today about a remarkable human being and writer.